My God, I can't get over the amount of news that comes out every single day from Nvidia, from AMD, from Broadcom, OpenAI, all the main players in the AI space. We just heard from Nvidia today at their GTC event, the keynote where Jensen Huang likes to brag about all his shiny new things and why his stock is going to $300, which we covered in a lot more detail in this video here. But Nvidia just announced that they're going to be building the next biggest supercomputer that the world has ever seen, and partnering with the US government, the Department of Energy, to do so. Now, this comes literally one day after AMD announces a partnership with the US Department of Energy to form a $1 billion supercomputer. So I know you guys are going to call me a big fat liar and think I'm completely capping, but I literally was putting together a presentation yesterday going through why I think Nvidia is about to get a massive supercomputer deal in a partnership with the US government. Now, you don't have to believe me because we still have to talk about it. It makes me sad that I wasn't able to tell you about this before they announced it. Literally one day, they didn't give me enough time to process all this information. But today we're gonna talk about it anyways because there's some major things we have to pay attention to going forward, and it affects all the biggest AI players and therefore affects you. Because as we've talked about so much on this channel, AI spending makes up the majority of the economy at this point. And we don't just have to say that, we can prove it with the numbers. AI spending on all this data center infrastructure is now making up more GDP growth or contributing more to GDP growth than consumer spending. This is very important stuff that you have to understand. The economy and how we see money, how we see assets is transforming right in front of our eyes. Now let's talk about it. So before we get into any specifics about the AMD supercomputer deal, the Nvidia supercomputer deal, and how I failed to warn you in time of this crazy big news with the stock jumping massively today, I know, very sad. We gotta build a little bit of context. What has been happening in the past that has led us to believe that things will only accelerate and get even more absurd and unbelievable and bubbly, as everybody likes to say. Everybody's throwing around that term, right? How is that going to accelerate the theme moving forward? We know AMD and OpenAI struck a deal for 6 gigawatt of AMD GPUs. That's a massive amount. Know that 1 gigawatt is the power used to power about 1 million people's homes. So 6 gigawatts, we're talking about almost the size of a city like New York City with 8.5 million people. We have OpenAI and Broadcom announcing a partnership for 10 gigawatts. And obviously the big kahuna in all of this, Nvidia, they promised to invest $10 billion into OpenAI, Sam Altman, and his dreams of becoming the AI provider of the world for every gigawatt of data center that they deploy, which then just results in $300 to $400 billion of revenue for Nvidia. We also see just how absurd these numbers are getting, and it's not just Fugazi. I know it's easy to believe that, and that's what a lot of people are saying on social media, but the money is there to back it up. JP Morgan CEO Jamie Dimon, their firm is pretty optimistic on this whole AI bubble thing. Nvidia could generate $35 to $40 billion per gigawatt. AMD, $20 billion per gigawatt. Broadcom, $27 billion per gigawatt. This is a ton of money we're talking about. And again, something we've talked about in the past. Founder and CEO of Grok, Jonathan Ross, says it best with this one quick line.
If you don't have energy, then your civilization grinds to a halt. With AI, it's about generating things. If you do not have compute, you actually cannot generate things. So just like you need fuel to run an industrial economy, you need compute. And if you don't have that compute, you cannot have AI.
Just like we need energy security, energy allows us to progress, allows us to build things, allows us to travel. It pretty much enables everything, right? Just like we need energy security. Now, in this world, the current world that we live in this new technological revolution that's called artificial intelligence, we need compute. If you don't have compute, you're not going to be able to generate things. And if you can't generate things, you're going to fall behind. So what Meta, Microsoft, and all these big tech companies are throwing $10 bajillion per year at AI because they can't afford to fall behind the growth curve, this also applies to you. If you don't have the skill set to stay relevant in this economy, to provide value at your job or your small business or whatever journey you're on right now, you need to have these skills. And now that we've built some context, we got to go back to the epicenter of it all.
Our next guest is one of President Trump's favorite CEOs.
Jensen, would you come up and say a few words? This is a smart cookie.
Jensen, will you stand up? What a job. What a job you've done. Man.
I'm looking at you guys. You're taking over the world, Jensen. I don't know what you're doing here.
Nvidia is at the epicenter. We're the engine of the largest industrial revolution in human history.
So that was like, I don't know, 15 to 20 seconds. I feel like it's easy to glaze over or just push aside what we just heard. We had the President of the United States, the most powerful and most wealthy country on the entire planet, in Donald Trump, pretty much at the whim of Jensen Huang. He's a smart cookie. He doesn't really know what he's doing, but I hope he's doing the right thing. And then we have Jensen Huang say they're the epicenter of the next biggest industrial revolution that human history has ever seen. Now, there's many parts of this AI industrial revolution. To build out an AI capable data center, you need a lot of different things, right? You need to design the chips to make them as fast and power efficient as possible. You need to manufacture them on these tiny silicon wafers. You need to cable these things all together. You need to cool them because they get really hot. You need the energy to actually power them and get them to work. And then you need people to use them. This is a lot going on here, but at the epicenter of it all, we just heard it's Nvidia. Jensen Huang said it himself. And again, many people question still, is AI a bubble? But then again, we look at deals like this, which we covered in a lot more detail in this video here. Literally a partnership between some of the most wealthy companies in the world, involving Nvidia, involving building out and buying out data centers. You can watch that video if you're more interested in the implications of this. But while we're on a similar tape, and to greatly simplify this, BlackRock, the largest asset manager in the entire world with over 13 trillion in assets, some of the world's wealthiest sovereign wealth funds of entire nations, are teaming up with the biggest big tech companies, biggest energy generation companies to build out data centers. Clearly, the trend is in one direction, and that's up. We all know that at this point. That's clearly reflecting in Nvidia's stock price, just hitting all-time highs. But we gotta talk about the implication of two of the news stories that we mentioned at the beginning of this video. Now that we understand where we're at and how this is so incredibly important to you, to big tech, to the entire economy, what are the implications of this supercomputer partnering with the US government, and even AMD's partnership with the Department of Energy, the US government? And again, you should subscribe so I'm more likely to release these videos on time and get this information out before they announce it, literally 7 hours before I recorded this video. Sad stuff. So let's just be honest at this point. Obviously, $1 billion is a lot of money, but I think we all have an understanding that to value these companies nowadays, like Nvidia at 5 trillion, like AMD at nearly 500 billion, like Broadcom over 1 trillion. These sums of money that we're seeing are bigger than the GDPs of some of the wealthiest nations on the entire planet. So to assign valuations like this, $1 billion deals ain't gonna cut it. Let's just be honest, right? But what is gonna cut it is this right here. We mentioned the United States. Why is that important? It doesn't matter the size of the deal. What matters is the conviction of our own government to dedicate resources, to dedicate capital to this cause and move it in the right direction. Nvidia's goal is to have everybody build out in the Nvidia ecosystem, to continually build out the moat that they currently have over competitors like AMD, over competitors in, let's say, China. You get the idea. Now, again, this wasn't meant to be on this slideshow because I was supposed to record this video and convince you that this announcement was probably in the works. I obviously didn't think it would happen the next day, literally 24 hours later, but this is what I would have told you, and I'm still going to tell you now. If we see this kind of deal with AMD, from the Department of Energy, from the government of the United States, then what do you think is coming between Nvidia and the Department of Energy and the United States? And you know what? We'll go one step even deeper. It's not just because AMD announced a partnership and Jensen Huang, he's trying to one-up his cousin Lisa Su, CEO of AMD, right? There's even one step deeper than this that we have to understand and hit on here. This actually isn't the first time that Nvidia has partnered with the Department of Energy, with the US government, to build out a supercomputer to fast track scientific discovery, whether that be drug discovery, whether that be accelerating the development of more reliable and cleaner sources of energy like nuclear fusion, right? Whether that be for a million different life-changing, world-altering technologies and discoveries. Whatever it is in your wildest dreams, this has already happened. Meet the exascale computing project. Now, there's a few things we have to cover here. This is a lot of boring text, but I'm going to greatly simplify and summarize what exactly this is and why it's important to understand. So this project ran from 2016 to 2024 and was a joint effort by the Department of Energy and a bunch of scientists to use high performance computing to accelerate technological breakthroughs in a bunch of different things like energy assurance, something we just talked about, potentially nuclear fusion, healthcare, scientific discovery, security. Well, that's funny. This sounds oddly familiar, and that's because it is. Nvidia provided a significant portion of the compute, the GPU technology, to the exascale computing project in a partnership with the US Department of Energy to build out the data center that was needed to provide the exascale computing project. Now, when you hear exascale, what do you think that means? No, it's not a term for some alien or fiction movie. Exascale computing systems refer to systems that can perform at least 10 to the 18th or 1 quintillion calculations or operations per second. Now, I want to give you perspective because this sounds like a massive number, right? 1 quintillion operations per second. Are you kidding me? What do you even need that much compute for? Don't worry, we're just getting started here. What I showed you earlier, this right here, this supercomputer, this is just one tiny part of the 1 gigawatt data center that Nvidia is going to help provide the compute technology and the other AI data center infrastructure to help OpenAI build out their data centers, help Meta build out their data centers, help Microsoft build out their data. You get the point. They're helping every damn company in the world build out their data centers. And you see this right here? Yeah, this 1 gigawatt data center that we're talking about, that could deliver between 10 and 20 Zeta flops. I'm not making these things up. I know they sound cool, Exa and Zeta. These are actual prefixes that we used to describe how many operations these things can do in 1 second. 200 Zeta flops. That is 200 billion, trillion floating point operations per second. In other words, about 1,000 times as fast as that exascale computing project that took 10 years to develop. Let this sit for a second. We're looking to build out 1 gigawatt data centers in 3 years, in 2 years, in 1 year. I mean, this is absolutely absurd. The scale of the money, of the technology that's involved. We've never seen something like this in the history of humankind. I'm running out of breath because this is so damn ridiculous. And wait, I'm not done yet. I promise we're almost there. But 1 gigawatt. We just talked about 1 gigawatt's 200 Zeta flops potentially. Nvidia, with OpenAI alone, is building out 10 gigawatts. Now, there's a ton of things to worry about in this whole supply chain. Again, we could run through this list here, and obviously Nvidia is able to design all these chips and release these new hardware refresh cycles just like Apple does with the iPhone, right? Throw on a new camera, throw on some new battery, and people are willing to pay $200 more for the newest iPhone. You're going to see the same thing with Nvidia chips, from Blackwell to Rubin Ultra coming next year. But the real question is, At what point in this supply chain are we going to have the bottleneck? We've already seen with memory. They're already seeing a shortage of high bandwidth memory. Micron, a company that supplies HBM, was literally booked out for the entire calendar year of 2025. The advanced packaging, TSM, the partner we just talked about that's actually manufacturing the chips that Nvidia designs and AMD designs. Nvidia says, guys, we literally need you to build an entire factory just dedicated to Blackwell to meet our current demand, and it's going to employ over 7,000 people and produce approximately 240,000 systems. So yes, Nvidia is going to continue to sell chips. They make 5.5 million. If they made 20 million, they'd sell every single one of them. But at what point are we going to be bottlenecked? And I think we can get into this in a little bit more detail in the next video. We'll talk about what this means for the energy providers, because I think, again, it's kind of an overlooked industry. I'm going to hold my tongue because I really want to get into it, but that's for the next one. Now, finally, I want to sum it up with this. We talked about a lot in this video. One of those things being how I could have minted you a lot of money if I just record this video a little bit sooner. I'm sorry, okay? Just believe me. But the point is this. Yeah, it's a $1 billion supercomputer. Who flippin' cares about $1 billion? That literally doesn't even hold a candle to some of these deals we're talking about with OpenAI. No, it's not that, it's this. It opens the door to future deals between super powerful and influential entities like the US government. I think we could all agree on that at the very least. And they're already showing intent and conviction that, hey, we're willing to do this now. And if Jensen Huang, the CEO of Nvidia, is telling us, hey, we need to keep doing this both now and very much into the future, because if we want to have control over AI, if we want any say in what happens in the future, then we need to be the ones to win the AI arms race. And he's saying the demand is bigger than anybody on this planet is currently saying. Because he's the CEO of Nvidia, is he overly biased? Maybe. Does he have the best idea of what's actually happening because he talks to the CEOs and he talks to his clientele? Probably. That's up to you to decide. But at the end of the day, this is what you need to pay attention to. If governments are willing to adopt this super fast growth curve of building out AI data center infrastructure, you need to consider that this may just be the beginning, not the end, not a bubble. Could things change? Of course things could change. But right now, I don't know, the growth story is just looking more and more convincing. Now, I know we just hit on this in a recent video, but I want to give you a warning. I want to give you an advantage when it comes to potentially trading Nvidia stock, because earnings are right around the corner. Now, I know there's a lot of optimism, and based on what we just talked about in this video, I mean, they are absolutely going to annihilate earnings. It shouldn't be remotely close, but that's not what's important. It's how they guide into the future. Nonetheless, I want to see how Nvidia performs directly following earnings on average. So let's pretend that you have some balls of steel, that you have some very high mental toughness, and you're willing to trade Nvidia earnings. Based on the last 5 years, you bought every single day of earnings and sold 30 days later on Nvidia stock. What should you expect? Well, you should expect some pretty good things. I can promise you that. You made 73% over that period, won more than half the trades, but I hate to tell you this, you underperformed just the benchmark, just the Qs or the SPY by 56%. And if we look at if you just held Nvidia during this time, well, yeah, it's pretty sad to look at. You'd have about $3.3 million as opposed to $173,000. So yeah, it's pretty sad to look at this. Obviously, nobody could have predicted in 2020, except maybe Jensen Huang, what would have happened to Nvidia's stock price. We have many other strategies we could test with this tool. So let me know if you think of any other strategies that might work on the Nvidia beast or any other stock for that matter. I really hope this video helps shed some light on just how absurd this stuff keeps getting. Every day it just keeps getting more interesting. So I'll talk to you very soon. We're going to talk about the impact of this in a little bit more detail coming up. So subscribe and like if you made it this far. I appreciate you watching. And I guess I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye now. Bye-bye. Believe me, I predicted this. Believe me.